Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookish Babbles, the podcast where we reread our favorite books and chat about them. I'm your host, Alyson, and without further ado, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of Bookish Babbles. Today we're talking about chapters 24 to 26 of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Hope you're all doing well. Last week, Coriolanus arrives in District 12 and starts peacekeeper training. Sejanus also shows up and gives Corio his diploma. The two of them attend a hanging. Coriolanus sees his first mockingjay and hates it on sight. They go to the Hob and watch the covey perform, and just as Coriolanus and Lucy Gray are about to be reunited, they're interrupted when her ex shows up. This week, Coriolanus and Sejanus track Lucy Gray down. Lucy Gray starts writing a new song, and Sejanus starts acting suspicious. And we have a lot to cover in this episode because usually my notes are about like 10 to 15 pages, but this time it's 20 pages and they're typed, so strap in, folks. With all that being said, let's not waste any time and we'll dive right into chapter 4. Okay, so this chapter picks up right where the last one ended. Lucy Gray's ex, the one that's mentioned in the song that she sings on interview night, is here. He has officially killed the party mood and interrupted the reunion Lucy Gray and Coriolanus were about to have. We learn that his name is Billy Tope. I have no idea if I pronounced that second part correctly, but I don't care because I don't respect this guy. Maud Ivory yells at him to go away and that no one wants him and to take his quote-unquote weasel girl with him because, don't forget, Mayfair, the mayor's daughter, is with him. Billy is drunk and insults the group, telling them that they're sounding thin because basically he's saying that they're no good without him, and I, however, say they are better without him, so F off, Billy. Barbager also tells Billy to F off. She doesn't use those words exactly, but I like to think that, she said the actual F word. Billy does speak directly to Clerk Carmine, offers to let him come with him. Says that they can do just fine on their own. And Coriolanus thinks that the two of them are likely brothers, and later it does get confirmed that they are. So this whole situation is just really sad. And seeing that Billy is about to become everyone's problem, a couple of peacekeepers step forward to tell Billy to, calm down. Billy, however, does not take this well and shoves one of the peacekeepers, and it looks like a brawl is about to happen. Then someone turns the lights out. Naturally, chaos happens. Coriolanus gets punched in the face. He starts punching randomly, trying to keep himself safe, and this reminds him of the wildness he experienced in the arena when the tributes were hunting him. And he thinks back to Dr. Gall's words, which are, "That's mankind in its natural state. That's humanity undressed," unquote. And this whole experience, just fighting wildly in the dark, I feel like it starts to make Coriolanus think that Gall may have a point. Thus, more justification for his belief that the capital should control everything. It also doesn't help that the Grand Man for years has been telling him that people from the districts are wild and, will drink blood and a lot of weird stuff like that. Anyway, horns blare outside, truck headlights come in, whistles blow, and everyone disperses. It's just, chaos in the dark. Coriolanus loses sight of where Lucy Gray is, but hopes to find her outside. Unfortunately, he doesn't find her, nor Billy or the rest of the covey, and realizes they must have gone out another way. The peacekeepers, however, do catch Mayfair, and she's now in a really sour mood. So Coriolanus and Sejanus are recruited to escort Mayfair home along with some other peacekeepers. Coriolanus feels vulnerable and alert the whole time since he doesn't have a weapon to protect himself, or even his uniform to give him some sort of illusion of protection. And he's also pretty shaken because, unlike at the hanging, the people actually fought back. Anyway, Mayfair continues to be a brat. She snaps at the officers, saying, like, why can't they leave her alone? The officer snaps back, saying, why can't she stay away from Billy and no good will come of it? And, she says, mind your own damn business. I mean, he's got a point, though. So, maybe you should have listened, girl. Anyway, they make it to the mayor's house. Mayfair storms inside without acknowledging them, and they decide to just leave because they don't want a lecture from the mayor, because, like most parents who don't properly, raise their kids, it's somehow never their darling little angel's fault. No, but somehow everyone else's fault. I'm sure anyone who's ever worked in schools or with kids in any capacity knows at least one parent who's like that. Or a few. There's always some. So as the group turns to leave, Coriolanus sees a shadowy figure moving in the bushes, and it's Billy, and he's scowling directly in Corio's direction. Corio thinks about, alerting the others that Billy's there, but ultimately decides not to, just in case it would somehow earn sympathies from Lucy Gray and the rest of the covey, and Billy's essentially now sleeping in the bushes outside the mayor's house because he's not welcomed home. And then Coriolanus remembers the last couple lines of the song that Lucy Gray sang on interview night, and the lines are, too bad I'm the bet that you lost in the reaping. Now what will you do when I go to my grave? So it's clear that Billy getting close with the mayor's daughter caused him to be shut out by the covey, and at the beginning of the book, I think it was Sejanus who was sure that the reaping had been rigged. Lucy Gray even hinted, her getting reaped wasn't an accident, so it's kind of Billy's fault that, all these terrible things happened to her. Anyway, they get back to base and go to bed. The next morning at breakfast, they get the news that because of the trouble from the previous night, no soldier is allowed to leave the base alone, and they're even considering shutting down the hob. Naturally, Corio's worried about, when/how he'll see Lucy Gray. Sejanus reveals that he found out she lives in an area called the Seam. Very familiar place in District 12, from the trilogy. And anyway, he asked someone who was very drunk about it, and, the person he asked won't remember the conversation. So the two of them plan to spend the day looking for Lucy Gray. They get bags of ice from the ice machine because it's the middle of summer. It's very hot. And it's, I think, on the map of Panem that we see, District 12's in Pennsylvania, near the Appalachian Mountains. I've been to Pennsylvania in the summer. It does get really hot, so that's accurate. So they wander around for a bit. They go to the bakery, and Sejanus trades some gum for bread, and they get directions to the Seam. As they keep going, Corio's resolve starts to waver a little bit. So yeah, his resolve is wavering, and he's getting tired and walking through the heat. And here's a passage on page 377. Coriolanus made out a fringe of green in the distance. He trudged along, thinking with fondness of his bunk, and remembered that Sunday meant fried bologna and potatoes. Maybe he was not cut out to be a lover. Maybe he was more of a loner at heart. Coriolanus, more loner than lover. One thing about Billy Tope, he reeked of passionate feeling. Is this what Lucy Gray wanted? Passion, music, liquor, and moonlight, and a wild boy who embraced them all? Not a perspiring peacekeeper showing up at her door on a Sunday morning with a split lip and a sagging bag of ice. He gave over the lead to Sejanus, following him up and down cinder paths without comment. Eventually his companion would grow tired, and they could go back and catch up on their letter writing. Sejanus, Tigris, his friends, the faculty, all of them had been dead wrong about him. He had never been motivated by love or ambition, only a desire to get his prize and a nice, quiet, bureaucratic job pushing papers around and leaving him plenty of time to attend tea parties. Cowardly and, what had Dean Bottom called her? Oh yes, vapid. Vapid like his mother. What a disappointment he'd have been to Crassus Xanthus Snow. I mean, at least he's self-aware in that moment. I could have told you you wouldn't be a good boyfriend from the beginning. Anyway, eventually they do find the house they're looking for because they hear someone singing outside. So it's Maud Ivory. She is outside of a house that's at the edge of the seam, and she's cracking nuts and singing. She then sees them and goes inside to get Barb Asher. Maud Ivory recognizes Coriolanus because she had seen him introduce Lucy Gray on the TV at interview night. Barb Asher thanks Corio and gives him directions to the meadow where Lucy Gray is, and Maud Ivory shows them the way. As they walk, they make conversation with Maud Ivory, who tells them that interview night was the one night where they could get a clear signal to watch, and Tam Amber had to use a lot of foil to do it to get the signal. And she also tells them that it's a luxury that they have a TV in their own home because I guess most don't. And again, this whole experience in 12 and, seeing the lack of TVs is likely what gives Corio the idea in the future to, quote-unquote, generously give everyone in the districts working TV to watch the games because, if the point of the Hunger Games is to punish the districts, then they don't exactly get the full impact if they can't watch the games. After all, people in the districts can't feel, the full impact and horror of the games unless they watch it. As the three of them walk toward the meadow, Maud Ivory keeps chatting and apologizes for Coriolanus getting punched in the face and tells him that wherever Billy goes, trouble follows. Then Maud Ivory goes on to explain how everyone in the covey is connected after Sejanus asks if Billy is her brother. So, according to Maud Ivory, Billy is a Clade and that he and Clerk Carmine are brothers, so, again, confirming Corio's earlier suspicions. Also, it just makes the situation for Clerk Carmine even sadder because this is his big brother who has, broken the trust of their family, and he's only 12 when all of this is happening. Like, he's Prim's age. Also, we learn that Lucy Gray, Barb Asher, and Maud Ivory are cousins. They're the Barrett cousins. So it sounds like the covey is, was a group of traveling musicians made up of all these different families. Though Tam Amber, however, wasn't born into the covey, he was found as a baby in a cardboard box on the side of the road. And Maud Ivory says jokes on whoever abandoned him because he's like one of the best string players ever. And also, just to make the situation even sadder, Billy's betrayal really does cut deep for the whole group because the covey are clearly very loyal to each other, and all they have now are the few of them that are left. Because keep in mind, all the adults that once cared for them are now dead. Earlier, Lucy Gray even mentioned having 2 older sisters, but they're clearly not around anymore. So these kids have all been through a lot. Then Billy is responsible for Lucy Gray going into the Hunger Games, so he isn't welcomed home now. He has to sleep in the bushes outside the mayor's house. Anyway, enough on that sadness. They get to the field, and Maud Ivory points out to where Lucy Gray is sitting on a rock with her guitar, and she says that she's with Seamus. Corio has a moment of panic because, who is Seamus? Is it possible that Billy really wasn't the lover from the song? Nope, but it's fine. Seamus is just a goat. It's all good. It's then that Sejanus shows Maud Ivory the loaf of bread that they got from the bakery earlier and offers to go back to the house with her so they can eat it. And, because, being a good wingman, so Corio can reunite with Lucy Gray alone. As he walks toward her, Coriolanus feels nervous, but he's also excited because the setting of their reunion is even better than he could have hoped for. A meadow full of flowers, definitely a more romantic and a more intimate setting rather than the Hob when they're surrounded by a bunch of people. He also approached her as quietly as possible, wanting a chance to observe her when all of her defenses are down and she isn't performing for anyone. And also, she's in the middle of composing a song that is very familiar to us. Now, I've probably said this before, but the first time I read this book, I had quite a few moments where I was shocked. Like, when it was revealed at the beginning that Tigris is Koryo's cousin, I had to put the book down because I couldn't believe it. This was another one of those moments. My jaw literally dropped. And all I can think about is like years later when Coriolanus is, president during the events of Mockingjay. Like, what was his reaction? Like when, 13 released the broadcast with Katniss singing The Hanging Tree. I would do anything to be a fly on the wall in that fictional room when President Snow hears Katniss singing it for the first time. He must have been quaking in his boots. There's also this cartoon someone made that was, circling around. I'll post it in the Instagram story if I can find it, but it's a cartoon strip of, Snow drinking tea and watching the broadcast and being like, "Oh, what's Katniss up to now?" and spits his tea out the second he hears the Hanging Tree song, and then the ghost of Lucy Gray and Sejanus come out and start cheering Katniss on. Oh, I'll also link Maya Wynn's cover of The Hanging Tree in the show notes because Lionsgate didn't make her take that one down. Anyway, it becomes clear to Coriolanus that Lucy Gray is writing a song about the hanging from the other day, and also ponders the meaning behind some of the lyrics, particularly the line about meeting up at the hanging tree, hoping it means him, as he does. He ends up giving away his presents by stepping on a branch and snapping it. This naturally startles Lucy Gray, and she holds up her guitar to defend herself, thinking she's about to be attacked because, like she says, she still has one foot in the arena. Maybe not the best way to approach someone who's been through the games. I feel like a common symptom among most victors is just being, more jumpy and on edge. I can't blame them at all. Haymitch still sleeps with a knife 20-something years after his games. Anyway, check out this paragraph on page 383. You can see Coriolanus grasp what Lucy Gray must be going through emotionally in that moment, and also have his narcissism showing at the same time. It's kind of impressive. If his brief foray in the games had left him nervous and nightmarish, he could only imagine how damaged she was. The last month had upended their lives and had changed them irrevocably. Sad, really, as they were both rather exceptional people, for whom the world had reserved its harshest treatment. Now, I'm not a psychologist, obviously. I only ever took one intro to psych class my freshman year of college, but this paragraph alone just screams narcissism to me, from my very basic understanding. Common behavior that a narcissist has is believing that, they are exceptional, better than most people. I mean, Koryo here believes he's so special that surely it's the only explanation for why he's getting such a difficult life. And I'm not saying that he hasn't had terrible things happen to him, but he still needs some perspective. Anyway, they reunite, they embrace, they kiss, gag. Good for them. But he gives her the remaining ice. Then she tells him everything that happened to her off camera since the game started. So this is what we get. This is what she tells us. So she and Jessup, they hid out in the tunnels, which she described as a maze, and he kept getting sicker, which we know. During the first night, they did hide out near the entrance, so they heard all the commotion when Coriolanus and Sejanus moved Marcus's body and had to run away from the other tributes. Coriolanus tells her that he had to... I'm so sorry, guys. But, I'm so dumb when I was typing this. So I made a typo in my notes. I accidentally typed, Coriolanus tells her that he had to kiss Bobbin. That would have been a twist. But no, okay. He tells her that he had to kill Bobbin, which sucks for him, of course, but also, ends up helping Lucy Gray because he got rid of a powerful player. And Lucy Gray admits to 3 kills. She admits to Wovey, though that was somewhat unintentional because she left a poisoned water bottle laying around, hoping that Coral would be the one to pick it up. She did poison the puddle that Reaper drank from toward the end, which turned out to be a mercy kill because Reaper ended up contracting rabies from Jessup when they were in the zoo, and Jessup spit in his eye after Reaper went around promising apologizing to everyone for having to kill them. And then, of course, Treach, when she had to put the snake on him to defend herself, she still doesn't understand why the snakes liked her so much, knows that, it can't be because of her singing voice, because as we've discussed, snakes don't hear very well. So Choreo explains the whole fiasco when he puts the handkerchief in the snake tank so that the creatures will be familiar with her scent and not, kill her. Yada yada, they have some more quote-unquote romantic banter, whatever, I don't care. Lucy Gray says something about their relationship being written in the stars, again, gag. And this is the last person you should be in a relationship with, Lucy Gray, him and Billy. After that, they decide to go back to the house because Seamus the goat needs milking. As they're walking back to the house, Lucy Gray asks Choreo if he can write a letter to Pluribus Bell asking for some new guitar strings since she'll need them soon. And we also learned something really interesting at this moment. Lucy Gray tells us that before she went back to 12, Dean Highbottom gave her some money, and he apologized for what she had to go through, then shoved a wad of cash into her pocket. Doesn't say how much exactly, but it is a pretty significant amount, enough to make up for the fact that the covey didn't work while Lucy Gray was in the capital. And she still has enough to buy the guitar strings from Pluribus. Coriolanus is naturally very offended that Highbottom gave money to his girlfriend. Can't understand why he would do it. His best guesses are, guilt, pity, respect for Lucy Gray, or a morphling-induced whimsy. Maybe a little bit that last one. Personally, I think it's most likely out of guilt, maybe a little bit of respect for Lucy Gray, because, she was a good player. As they head to the house, Lucy Gray asks about Tigress and promises to send her a song if she can write one good enough. And I think I've made it very clear by now that I am a Tigress stan, apparently. So I will always bring her up every time she's mentioned, even if it's a tiny significant detail. So then we get a description of the house. It has one large open room, a sleeping area up in a loft, an old refrigerator in the kitchen, and the freezer doesn't work. A rack of costumes on the right wall, instruments on the left wall. There's an old television with oversized antennas, rigged and, twisted with pieces of aluminum, and very little furniture apart from some chairs and a table. As soon as Lucy Gray and Coriolanus walk in, Barbager tells Lucy Gray that he is making trouble again and takes her over to the window. He, of course, is Billy. He claimed to come back for the rest of his stuff, which the rest of the covey threw all that stuff out the back. Outside, Billy and Sejanus are having a conversation, which annoys Maud Ivory because Sejanus promised to help her crack nuts, and because, Billy's here and she really hates him now. The two of them are also knelt on the ground and appear to be drawing something in the dirt. Coriolanus can't understand the cause for worry. Barbager thinks it looks like Sejanus is giving Billy directions, and if that's true, he really needs to go. So Coriolanus and Lucy Gray go outside to confront Billy, and Choreo is back with his disturbing thoughts. On page 398, this is what he's thinking. It was time, anyway, that he confronted Billy Tope and laid down a few rules. Billy Tope had to accept that Lucy Gray was no longer his, but belonged firmly and for always to Coriolanus. Yeah, I think I just threw up in my mouth a little reading that out loud. Also, don't think too highly of yourself there, Choreo. You're basically the rebound. Anyway, when Billy finally notices the two of them approaching, he immediately swipes the picture away, and the chapter ends with Coriolanus realizing that it was a map of the base. Dun dun dun! And with that being said, it's time for a break. So when we come back, we'll talk about chapter 25. Hi guys, it's Alyson at a different point in time. So I wanted to try something new during these breaks, and that is random recommendations, which is exactly what it sounds like, just me randomly giving book recommendations, because why not? It sounds fun. So this is the first one I'm going to do. So first I'll recommend is my second favorite Alice Oseman book, next to Radio Silence, of course, and that's Loveless by Alice Oseman. So I'll just read you guys the description that's on the back of the book. Georgia has never been in love, never kissed anyone, never even had a crush, but as a fanfic-obsessed romantic, she's sure she'll find her person one day. As she starts university, Georgia makes a plan to find love, but when her actions wreak havoc among her friends, she questions why romance seems so easy for other people, yet not for her. With new terms thrown at her, asexual, aromantic, Georgia is more uncertain about her feelings than ever. Is she destined to remain loveless, or has she been looking for the wrong thing all along? Amazing, coming out story and, coming of age self-discovery for an Arrow Ace main character, and I highly, highly recommend it. It just last month was published in the U.S. finally after, back in 2020 being published in the UK, and it is the Barnes & Noble Book Club. Last month there's a special edition, so naturally I got that one, and I accidentally got the non-special edition one and the original one that came out in the UK. Basically, I have 3 copies of this book. That's how much I recommend it. So anyway, back to the show. And we're back. So where were we? Right. They see the drawn map. Sejanus almost immediately rises to his feet and just, gives off guilty energy, and he can tell Coriolanus isn't happy. The first thing Billy says is directed at Lucy Gray, and he says, "Well, look who decided to talk to me," implying that, this is the first time that they've spoken since the Hunger Games. And Lucy Gray tells Sejanus that he's in trouble with Maud Ivory, and he, skirts off after exchanging a friendly goodbye with Billy. I don't know if it's his self-destructive streak or what, but Sejanus, you are a terrible judge of character at times, and it's actually quite alarming. And anyway, so Lucy Gray and Billy have an intense conversation starting at toward the bottom of page 391, so we're just going to read that. "You don't get it, there's no walking this back," said Lucy Gray. Billy turned angry. "You know I didn't try and kill you." "I know, you're still running with the girl that did," Lucy Gray shot back. "Here you've made yourself right at home at the mayor's. And who sent me over there in the first place, I wonder? Makes me sick how you're playing the kids. Poor Lucy Gray, poor lamb," he sneered. "They're not stupid, they want you gone too," she spat out. Billy then reacts by grabbing Lucy Gray by the wrist and pulling her toward him and, screaming like, "Where am I supposed to go?" And Lucy Gray then responds in the correct way, which is to bite his hand hard enough so that it hurts and he releases her. Now, I'm not a relationship expert, but Corio then does something that I consider to be good partner behavior. When Billy tells Corio that he, has a few surprises waiting for him, implying that there's things about Billy and Lucy Gray's history he doesn't know, Corio doesn't let the words get to him in the heat of the moment. Instead, he just stands by Lucy Gray's side and tells Billy that he knows all about him, knows everything he needs to know, blah, 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 which he's totally bluffing, but like I said, he's not doubting his partner and defends her, which I realize is the bare minimum, but it's still good to see. So good for you, Corio. B for effort. I can't give you an A because of all the creepy, possessive thoughts you were having a moment ago. Anyway, Billy finally goes away, and I'm going to read you guys the rant Lucy Gray goes off on about Billy. Gives an insight to their relationship. We then also get some more history involving Mayfair. This is on page 392. "He's a liar and a loose. Sure, I flirt with anybody. It's part of my job. But what he's implying, that's just not true." Lucy Gray looked over at the window. "And what if it was? What if it was that or letting Maud Ivory starve? Neither of us would have let that happen, no matter what it took. Only he's got a different set of rules for himself than for me. Like always. What makes him a victim makes me trash. This brought back disturbing memories of the conversation with Tigris, and Coriolanus changed the subject quickly. He's seeing the mayor's daughter now? That's how it is. I send him over there to pick up some cash teaching piano lessons, and the next thing I know, her daddy's calling out my name in the reaping, said Lucy Gray. Not sure what she told him. He'd go nuts if he knew she was running around with Billy Tope. Well, I survived the capital, but not to come back for more of the same. So that's a lot to unpack. For one thing, it sounds like Billy is a raging misogynist, definitely lacks some empathy, and is overall just seems like a selfish person. Okay, so let's just recap now everything we know that leads to the Covey shutting out Billy. So Billy and Lucy Gray were clearly an item, though it sounds like they didn't have a very healthy relationship. So yeah, not a healthy relationship, but at this point they have so much history and have been through so much together. Since they were kids, Lucy Gray probably wanted to try and make it work. Billy then gets hired to give Mayfair piano lessons, and why wouldn't you take the job? She's the mayor's kid. They can afford to pay him well. Stuff happens. Mayfair and Billy start an affair, and Mayfair, being very jealous of Lucy Gray, tells her father God knows what, but it's enough to get Mayor Lip to rig the reaping to make sure Lucy Gray goes into the arena. So Mayfair has now reached some Umbridge level evil right there. Lucy Gray is caught off guard by this and, reads between the lines enough to figure out what happened, but I don't think the rest of the Covey at this point necessarily knew the reaping was rigged because of Billy, because Lucy Gray wrote the ballad for the interview as a message to the Covey, and because they're the only one she cares about hearing it, and we know they do because Maud Ivory mentions watching interview nights, so that's when it becomes clear to the rest of the group what Billy did. So in conclusion, Billy sucks, and this whole giant mess, and the Covey, they deserve better than Billy, and better than Coriolanus for that matter. Sejanus they can keep. They can probably help set him straight if given the chance. Anyway, after ranting, Lucy Gray and Corio vowed to make a new life together, yada yada. And they find Sejanus and Maud Ivory milking the goat. Sejanus can't say no to her since he's in the doghouse for talking to the enemy. They're currently trying to make butter for Maud Ivory since she's been having constant nightmares ever since Lucy Gray was taken to the capital, and they're just trying to do little things to make her happy and help. Then when Sejanus and Maud Ivory come back inside, there's a conversation that gives a bit of an insight to the Covey's history, and it's initiated when Sejanus makes a comment about District 2. "Did I ever go to District 2? Maud Ivory asked. "No, baby, that's out west. The Covey stayed more east," Bobbisher told her. "Sometimes we went north," said Tam Amber, and Coriolanus realized it was the first time he'd heard him speak. "To what district?" asked Coriolanus. "No district, really," said Bobbisher. Up where the capital didn't care about." Coriolanus felt embarrassed for them. No such place existed, at least not anymore. The capital controlled the known world. For a moment he imagined a group of people in wild animal fur scraping out an existence in a cave somewhere. He supposed such a thing could happen, but that life would be a big step down from even the districts, barely human. "Probably rounded up like we were," said Clerk Carmine. And then I noticed there's a typo on my book. Right after that line I just read, it says, Barb Ivory gave a small smile. Clearly this is meant to be, Barbazure, but I just thought I'd point it out because it's funny. If anyone else has that same typo in their book, let me know. Anyway, the Covey now sadly has to get going since they've been hired to sing at a wedding that day. Coriolanus is naturally disappointed since he was hoping to spend the whole day with Lucy Gray. The two of them say goodbye, decide to keep their relationship private since they don't want people gossiping. They agree to meet before the show the following Saturday. Corio and Sejanus leave, and naturally he asks Sejanus about the conversation he had with Billy the second he can. According to Sejanus, Billy claims that Lil's friend, the woman who was who was arrested at the hanging. They just want to, find a way to communicate with her, make sure she's all right. Sejanus claims that he made no official promises to help, but we all know that he wants to. And so naturally, the two have a little bit of a fight. So it starts at the bottom of page 396 with Coriolanus saying, "Oh, wonderful, fantastic, so now you're a rebel informant." Coriolanus took off down the road. "I thought you were letting the whole rebel thing go." Sejanus followed on his heels. "I can't, all right? It's part of who I am, and you're the one who said I could help the people in the districts if I agreed to leave the arena." "I believe I said you could fight for the tributes, meaning you might be able to procure more humane conditions for them," Coriolanus corrected him. "Humane conditions?" Sejanus burst out. "They're being forced to murder each other, and the tributes are from the districts too, so I don't really see a distinction. It's a tiny thing, Corio, to check up on this girl." "Clearly it isn't," said Coriolanus. "Not to Billy Tope, anyway. Or why did he wipe out that map so fast? Because he knows what he's asking. He knows he's making you a collaborator. And do you know what happens to collaborators?" "I just thought," began Sejanus. "No, Sejanus, you're not thinking at all," steamed Coriolanus. "And even worse, you're falling in with people who barely seem capable of thought. Billy Tope? What's his stake in this anyway? Money?" "Because to hear Lucy Gray talk, the Covey aren't rebels, or capital. They're pretty much set on hanging onto their own identity, whatever that is." "I don't know. He said he was asking for a friend," stammered Sejanus. "A friend?" Coriolanus realized he was shouting and dropped his voice to a hush. "A friend of old Arlo, who set the explosion in the mines?" There was a piece of brilliant plotting. What possible result could he have been hoping for? They have no resources, nothing at all that would allow them to re-engage the war. And in the meantime, they're biting the hand that feeds them, because how will they eat here in 12 without those mines? They're not exactly bubbling over with options. What sort of strategy was that? "A desperate one, but look around." Sejanus grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. "How long can you expect them to go on like this?" Coriolanus felt a surge of hatred as he remembered the war, the devastation the rebels had brought to his own life. He yanked his arm free. They lost the war, a war they started. They took that risk. This is the price they pay. Sejanus looked about as if unsure which direction to go, and then slumped on a broken wall along the road. Coriolanus had an unpleasant feeling that he was somehow taking old Strabo Plint's role in the endless discussion over where Sejanus's loyalties lay. He had not signed up for this. On the other hand, if Sejanus went rogue out here, there was no telling where it would end. Coriolanus sat down beside him. "Look, I think things will improve, really, but not like this. As it gets better overall, it will get better here, but not if they keep blowing up the mines. All that does is add to the body count." Sejanus nodded, and they sat there for as a few raggedy children went by, kicking an old tin can down the road. "Do you think I've committed treason?" "Not quite yet," Coriolanus said with a half-smile. So yeah, that's a lot. Why do I get the feeling that in the future Coriolanus will keep using that thought of, it's not our fault that they bite the hand that feeds them, BS, to justify the capital continuing to abuse the districts and keep the Hunger Games going. Anyway, we then learned that Mr. Plinth had apparently gone to see Dr. Gall before going to the school board to talk about Sejanus' expulsion. Gall basically said that Sejanus is nothing like Coriolanus, since Sejanus' actions was a treasonous act of rebel support. So, as a result, Mr. Plinth sends her a check for a new lab, and just like that, Sejanus gets the most expensive ticket to District 12. Because let's not forget that Mr. Plinth is also paying for a new gym at the school. The fact that Sejanus is unintentionally helping rebuild the capital is a little bit hilarious. Like, he's literally the last person who would want to do anything to help the capital in that sense. Anyway, Sejanus agrees that he's being stupid, and they go back to base, where their bunkmates are literally just rolling out of bed, and that's a whole mood. Okay, so Sejanus helps Beanpole with his drills. Smiley and Bug go to the rec room. Coriolanus tries to study for the officer test, but has a difficult time focusing. He keeps thinking about what Sejanus told him about Gall, and Dr. Gall didn't exactly defend him, but, she did imply that Corio is in a higher class than Sejanus, since Coriolanus' only crime was a, faulty strategy. So now empowered with the idea that Gall hadn't written him off entirely, Coriolanus gets the bright idea to actually write to Gall, which just makes me want to scream, why? Corio, you've literally acknowledged before that this woman is batshit crazy and evil. Why do you want to still try and impress her? There's probably a deep psychological answer to that. My best guess is it's like a drug for Corio to impress powerful people because, he wants to feel important, but I'm not an expert on psychology, obviously, so moving on. He decides to write a letter/essay continuing the lesson she started to teach him the night she sent him into the arena. Talks about the state of District 12, how she was right about human nature being naturally wild and dark, and how they need to be watched and controlled. He tells her how, at the execution, none of the miners tried to fight back. It was daytime and they were surrounded by armed peacekeepers, but then when the lights went out in the hob, the miners were ready to fight since they weren't being as closely watched. He mails a letter, goes to dinner, and after that he and Sejanus study for the officer's test, and there's one coming Wednesday. That night, Coriolanus' dream shifts between kissing Lucy Gray and feeding Dr. Gall snakelets, which I think is pretty symbolic and, foreshadowy of the choices Coriolanus is going to make in the near future. Coriolanus signs up for the test and is excused from training for the next few days. Two exciting developments also happen that day. One, they would be put on guard duty, which is better than scrubbing dishes, and also that Coriolanus' suggestion about shooting the birds near the gallows had been approved. Yay, good for him. But the Citadel also wants them to trap about 100 jabberjays and mockingjays and to deliver them to the labs unharmed. Since his squad had been assigned to help position the cages in the trees, that meant that Coriolanus would be working with scientists from Gall's lab. Naturally, this puts Corio on edge since he doesn't want to be recognized by anyone from the lab, and he also starts worrying that Gall herself will show up, but it's really unlikely she would supervise this. Sejanus also doubts she'll be there since this is quote-unquote lackey work, and lo and behold, she isn't there. Thank goodness. Coriolanus does, however, recognize the scientist they're working with. It's the woman who yelled at him when he got lost in the lab and scared the birds after Clemencia was attacked by the snakes. Her name is Dr. K. The peacekeepers are instructed to lay the traps throughout the forest. The traps have food in them and are to be left open for 2 days. And on the third day, they will put fresh bait into the cages and then set off the traps. This is a pretty smart way to do it. Get the birds to trust the new environment. Think it's safe, then bang, they're trapped. This is the kind of trap Gale would come up with. Spoiler alert, I'm a hardcore Team PETA stan, so when we get to the trilogy, there will be Gale slander. Anyway, Coriolanus ends up with Bug, who we learn is from District 11 and is very skilled at climbing, so he's able to easily get traps onto the branches. And Coriolanus is also on edge all day because he doesn't really want Dr. K to recognize him since, he's still embarrassed from the whole expulsion thing. Anyway, now test day is here. 2 other people are taking the officer test. One is in his 50s, the other's in his late 20s, who claim to have already taken the test 5 times. Coriolanus apparently really likes taking tests, so it's an exciting few hours for him. Weirdo. He goes back to his bunk, but the rest of the squad is still out helping the scientist, and there are 2 boxes from Mrs. Plint, so yay! He decides to open them when everyone gets back. Coriolanus also gets a letter from her, just, thanking Corio for everything he's done for them, keeping an eye on Sejanus, blah, blah, blah. This also annoys him because he's getting tired of being seen as Sejanus' keeper, and he's pretty sure that it's only a matter of time before Sejanus does something reckless again, and Coria will be expected to get him out of it. And I'm going to read this passage from page 406. I think it's noteworthy, and I think it's an accurate insight to Sejanus' character. The thing was, he didn't believe Sejanus would ever really change. Perhaps he was incapable of it, but more to the point, he didn't want to. Already he had rejected what the peacekeeping life offered, pretending he couldn't shoot, refusing to take the officer candidate test, making it clear he had no desire to excel on behalf of the capital. District 2 would always be home. District people would always be family. District rebels would always have a just cause on their side, and it would be Sejanus' moral duty to help them. Coriolanus felt a new sense of threat rising up inside him. He tried to shrug off Sejanus' misguided behavior in the capital, but here it was different. Here he was viewed as an adult, and the consequences of his actions could be life or death. If he helped the rebels, he could find himself in front of a firing squad. What was going on in Sejanus' head anyway? So after thinking all that, Coriolanus then opens Sejanus' locker and goes through his things. First of all, not cool, snooping through people's things. So in the box of personal items, he finds a stack of mementos, pack of gum, medicine prescribed by a capital doctor, which are just sleeping capsules, sleeping capsules, I can't say that word. That stuff, and a bottle of morphling. There's a scrap of fabric, stationery pens, small chunk of marble carved into what looks like a heart, and a pile of photos. All the pictures are a family except for an old one of a... All of the pictures are family except for an older one that's a group of school children. And it's clear that this is his last school photo from District 2 Sejanus was in before moving to the capital, and it's made obvious because there's a young Marcus in the photo. This seems to confirm to Coriolanus where Sejanus' loyalties lie. There isn't even a single photo of any of his capital classmates, not even a single one of Corio, which is probably the most insulting part to him. And at the bottom of the pile is Sejanus' diploma in a silver frame. This seems really odd to Coriolanus because he's pretty sure Sejanus wouldn't care to frame the diploma since he likely has no intention of hanging it up. Then he realizes that Sejanus is hiding something under the frame, and it's a stack of cash. Coriolanus wonders if Mr. Plint sent it to Sejanus, then wonders if Sejanus took the money himself, if he perhaps, picked up on his father's tendency to use money for bribes in case he ever needed it. Coriolanus puts everything back right before the rest of the squad returns, and at the end of the chapter, Sejanus just flat out lies to Coriolanus now, and I'll read it out loud. As Smiley, Beanpole, and Bug tore open the boxes and unpacked the treasures within, Sejanus sat on a bed and watched with amusement. Coriolanus leaned on the bunk above him. "Thank goodness for your ma, otherwise we'd all be flat broke." "Yeah, not a penny between us," Sejanus agreed. The one thing Coriolanus had never questioned was Sejanus' honesty. If anything, he'd have welcomed a little less of it. But this was a bald-faced lie, delivered as naturally as the truth, which meant that now anything he said was suspect. Dun dun dun! Anyway, time for another break. I will talk to you guys again in a minute. Alright, we're back with one more book recommendation for the day. So this one's really special to me because my mom actually gave this one to me for Christmas one year. And it's like a middle grade contemporary. And here's the thing, normally my mom doesn't give me books. She'll usually, unless I tell her specifically which book to get me because she doesn't know, she'll usually give me a gift card or something, which I still really love and appreciate, obviously, because I love being able after Christmas to go to the bookstore and pick out whatever book I want. But this book was really special because she gave it to me on Christmas Day, and I do genuinely love this book. So again, I'll read you the description. Allie has been smart enough to fool a lot of smart people. Every time she lands in a new school, she's able to hide her inability to read by creating clever yet disruptive distractions. She's afraid to ask for help. After all, how can you cure dumb? However, Allie's newest teacher sees the bright, creative kid beneath the troublemaker and helps to shine a light on her gifts. As her confidence grows, Allie feels free to be herself and gets to know other kids who break the mold. When the outsiders start to fit in, surprising things begin to happen in Allie's classroom that show her there's a lot more to her and to everyone than a label. And I just really love this author, too. I've read a couple of her other books, and I've really enjoyed them, but this one's my favorite. So that is Fish in a Tree by Linda Mully Hunt. And with that being said, back to the show. Alright, we're back. Hope everyone's doing well. I just ate some blackberries because I was hungry. Anyway, so now, Coriolanus is suspicious of everything Sejanus says and does now. He can't even trust the simple, supportive comments Sejanus gives him of, how, hey, you're going to pass the officer test. So that night, Coriolanus is assigned to guard duty with an old-timer who almost immediately dozes off. He keeps thinking about Lucy Gray and is paranoid that, Billy could be trying to worm his way back into her heart. He hates the fact that he's trapped at base while she can freely move around whenever she wants, in wherever she wants to go in 12, whenever she wants, and thinks to himself that it was better in the capital when she was locked up because at least he always knew where she was, and that, my friends, is what I like to call a big ol' red flag. Later, when he's back in the bunk, he writes a note to Mrs. Plinth and one to Pluribus Bell asking for guitar strings for Lucy Gray. And the next day, the heat is still going on strong. Coriolanus is at least promoted to chopping instead of washing dishes in the kitchen, but the smell of onion still is pretty bad and lingers on him. Later that day, they're back to helping the scientist. Coriolanus ends up with Bug and Dr. K. He tries to linger back as much as he can, but K, of course, knows who he is. He remembers Lucy Gray's advice to, own it and just goes along with it, trying not to seem too embarrassed. And we then get to learn a little more about Dr. K, most notably that she had headed the Jabberjay project back during the war. And this makes Coriolanus feel more comfortable talking to her now since he'd only embarrassed himself during the Hunger Games while Kay was responsible for a nationwide failure. We then learn from Kay the mechanics of how the Jabberjays work, which I think is really cool because, we've known about Jabberjays for so long, but it's nice to know how they work. And it's also notable that Coriolanus only asked about it as though he seems interested, because something about hoping if he makes a good impression on Kay, it'll get back to Gaul, whatever. He's obsessed. Anyway, here's what we learn. Jabberjays are trained to respond to audio commands. They can mimic other birds or people, and when they're in neutral, they can fly around and mimic whatever they want. In order to be used for surveillance, they need to be put in record mode, and once they're in record mode, they're quiet. They need to be switched back to neutral in order to play the recording. Can record up to an hour on a good day, and designed to sneak out into forest-heavy areas. They're attracted to human voices, hence why they show up at all the executions. The Capitol would release them in record mode and then call them back with homing devices. They were most commonly released in District 12, 11, and 9. No one's entirely sure how the rebels found out about the Jabberjays. Could have seen the birds go back to base. Capitol got lazy, didn't check, the information, so rebels knew something was up, or possibly they just had a spy on base. Either way, they were released back into the wild on neutral, since muting them would have been cruel. Kay tells Corio about the Mockingjay's ability to repeat music, and they test it out. Coriolanus sings the first few lines of the national anthem, and the Mockingjay repeats the melody back to him. It just can't say words. And his immediate response to this is to say out loud, "We should kill them all." He also thinks to himself that the way the Mockingjays all sing together reminds him of the way the Covey sings together. So the text is clearly linking Lucy Gray and the rest of the Covey with the Mockingjays. same way, the trilogy does with Katniss. So it's a very clear sign that, in the end, there's no way Coriolanus can have any kind of relationship with Lucy Gray or the rest of the Covey. Yeah, everyone that he feels threatened by is linked to the Mockingjays. Anyway, Kay asked Corio why they should kill all the Mockingjays, because it seems a bit of an extreme comment. His answer is because, the Mockingjays are quote-unquote unnatural, which is funny because he seems okay with the Jabberjays, who were literally made in a lab. If anything, the Mockingjays came about in a more natural way than the Jabberjays did. Then again, this does kind of make sense for Coriolanus' character. We know he loves the Capitol, he loves control, so it makes sense that he'd be fine with something that the Capitol intentionally created, but he can't stand the Mockingjays because there's something new, something that was created spontaneously, and he doesn't understand and can't really control it. Only Corio seems to have this big of a problem with the Mockingjays. Dr. K thinks that, the Mockingjays are compatible with the environment and they should be fine. What's a few more songbirds in existence? And I think the cherry on top of this whole thing is they were instructed to catch 50 Jabberjays and 50 Mockingjays, but in the end they catch over 30 Jabberjays and not a single Mockingjay. They do it just to annoy Corio personally, even more. Dr. K theorizes that the reason for this is that the Jabberjays are less suspicious because, traps are more familiar to them versus, the Mockingjays who were born in the wild. Dr. K shrugs this off and says they can always come back with the nets if need be. Coriolanus thinks to himself, or the guns. Again, he is triggered by these birds to a point where it's kind of absurd. Like, dude, you need some psychological help, for many reasons. Anyway, they go back to base. Dr. K asks Bug and Corio if they want to help care for the birds until they go back to the Capitol. They both accept. It's a lot cooler in the hangar with the industrial fans going. And the next afternoon, Bug and Corio, they take care of the Jabberjays. While they're doing that, Bug expresses that he feels bad for the birds, thinking that, they should have just been left alone in the forest. Coriolanus thinks that the Jabberjays might prefer being in the lab, and the past 10 years in the wild was, the real nightmare for them. Personally, I agree with Bug. At this point, they've adapted to the wilds, and I mean, they were able to mate with other birds, so it couldn't have been a completely miserable 10 years. Coriolanus is impatient to go to the Hob that night, plans to slip away to see Lucy Gray as soon as they get there. He's also worried about Sejanus since Billy or anyone could talk to him. So he invites Sejanus to come backstage with him, and they have an easy time ditching the rest of their friends since it's a bigger crowd than the previous show and their friends are busy getting liquor. So the shed Lucy Gray said that they use as their backstage was an old garage that could hold about 8 cars. Maud Ivory is the first one to greet them. Coriolanus gives her the popcorn balls and she promises to sing him a special song. Coriolanus then talks to Lucy Gray, and I'm going to read the conversation that they have on page 421 because you can really start to see like the cracks in their relationship. So the conversation is initiated when Coriolanus asks about the garage. Right now it's our break room. We come here before and after the show and when we go off stage between numbers, she told him. But who owns it? He hoped they weren't trespassing. Lucy Gray seemed unconcerned. No idea. We'll just perch here until they shoo us off. Birds. Always birds with her when it came to the covey. Singing, perching, feathers in their hats, pretty birds all. He told her about his assignment with the Jabberjays, thinking she might be impressed that he'd been singled out to work with them, but it only seemed to make her sad. I hate to think of them caged up when they've had a taste of freedom, said Lucy Gray. What do they expect to find back in their labs? I don't know, if their weapons still work, he guessed. Sounds like torture, having someone control your voice like that. Her hand reached up to touch her throat. Coriolanus thought that a bit dramatic, but tried to sound comforting. I don't think there's a human equivalent. Really? Do you always feel free to speak your mind, Coriolanus Snow? She asked, giving him a quizzical look. Free to speak his mind? Of course he did. Well, within reason. He didn't go around shooting his mouth off about every little thing. What did she mean? She meant what he thought about the capital, and the Hunger Games, and the districts. The truth was, most of what Coriolanus did he supported, and the rest rarely concerned him. But if it came to it, he'd speak out, wouldn't he? Against the capital, like Sejanus had? Even if it meant repercussions? He didn't know, but he felt on the defensive. I do. I think you should say what you think. That's what my daddy thought too, and he ended up with more bullet holes than I could count on my fingers, she said. What was she implying? Even if she didn't say so, he'd bet those bullets came from a peacekeeper's gun, perhaps from someone dressed exactly as Coriolanus was now. And my father was killed by a rebel sniper. Lucy Gray sighed. Now you're mad. No, but he was. He tried to swallow his anger. I'm just tired. I've been looking forward to seeing you all week, and I'm sorry about your father. I'm sorry about my father, but I don't run Pen Am. So did Coriolanus just unintentionally manifest his future? I think so. Well, then again, the grandmam has been doing that for years because she always calls him Coriolanus Snow, future president of Pan Am. Also, you make things worse when you run Pan Am, so good job. Anyway, Maud Ivory lets them know it's showtime. Lucy Gray invites him and Sejanus to join them for a trip to the lake the next day. They take their seats in the audience, and Coriolanus starts drinking white liquor since he doesn't plan on seeing Lucy Gray again for the rest of the night. And he starts feeling better, and just a little bit bad for getting mad at Lucy Gray. At some point all but Maud Ivory and Lucy Gray leave the stage, and Maud Ivory sings the special song she promised Corio. And before she starts singing, Maud Ivory explains that each member of the covey owes their name to a ballad, and she's going to sing the one that Lucy Gray was named for, a poem written by William Wordsworth. And this is a real poem that was actually written by Wordsworth. Suzanne said that when she read this poem, it inspired the name for Lucy Gray in this book. And I guess she'd always had an idea of what this character would be like, but never had a name until she was writing the book and saw the poem. And of course, Maya Wynn did a cover and write music for this song, and I'll link to that video below because Lionsgate can't make her take that one down because the poem is public domain. And another reminder to sign the petition, also in the show notes below. So the poem basically tells the story of a little girl named Lucy Gray who gets lost during a snowstorm. Her parents go searching and never find her. No one knows what happens. Some speculate her ghost can still be seen in the forest, so it's a big mystery. Anyway, I like the poem and the song. Coriolanus does not. He can't make sense of the poem, and he also doesn't understand why Lucy Gray's parents would name her after a little girl in a poem who goes missing. And this reminds him of the time in class, Livia Cardew humiliating him in front of everyone because he hadn't understood a poem they were looking at. And this is the one time I might actually approve of something that Livia Cardew does. Anyway, he turns to talk to Sejanus, who's better at understanding poetry, but Sejanus is gone. And that's how the chapter ends. And with all that being said, we've come to the end of the episode. I feel like these were really long chapters. Like I said at the beginning, I made 20 pages of notes, which is the most I think I've ever made for an episode so far. And they're typed, so that's how you know it's long. And my throat is now very dry from talking. So yeah. That's the end of the episode. I'm so bad at closing these out. And it's getting late too. So don't forget to follow on Instagram. That'll of course be in the show notes, as well as the email, and follow, subscribe so you get notified, especially when I post bonus episodes, which I have a very exciting one coming up this week. So later this week, Thursday or by Friday at the latest, I will post an episode I recorded with one of my best friends, Sarah, who is the one who helped me come up with the title for this podcast. We're doing the Hamilton book tag together, and it was so much fun. I loved recording it with her, and I can't wait to edit it and for all you guys to listen to it. So be on the lookout for that. My brain's not working, so I gotta go. I hope you guys have a great day / night whenever you're listening, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.